Welcome back. We will continue our look at the components of Opensocial with the Opensocial container, which, if you'll recall, is the site where the HTML version of the gadget runs. The container is an embedded JavaScript interpreter that provides the Opensocial JavaScript API, and it can just be a web page with embeddable JavaScript modules that supply the API. The API provides two namespaces, Opensocial and Gadget, and the gadget can use the functions in these namespaces to get social networking data for the current user or access functions for the gadget itself. The Opensocial container also handles caching the gadget XML, and it handles user authentication, during which the user must present his credentials to the backend app in order to see his data. In Studio's gadgets, authentication in Opensocial is done using OAuth, which is outside the scope of this presentation. However, we can briefly mention that for an implementation using OAuth, the backend app needs to be an OAuth provider, and the container needs to be an OAuth client. Oftentimes, the Opensocial container and the gadget rendering server are on the same server, but they can also be on different servers. The open source project called Shindig is the reference implementation for Opensocial. Shindig provides out of the box the Opensocial container and the gadget rendering server. The purpose of Shindig is to provide infrastructure such that you can drop it into a server and make it Opensocial enabled very quickly. Shindig is available in Java and PHP, but if you're using a Rails app, you can use the gadget rendering server plugin instead, which re-implements the Shindig actions in Rails controllers. Now let's take a look at how the pieces of Opensocial all work together. The interaction begins when the client browser wants to show an Opensocial app. It makes a request to the Opensocial container, which in the Studio's model is the same server as the gadget rendering server. The container acts as a proxy for the gadget hosting server, which contains the gadget XML. When needed, which is when the container hasn't cached the gadget XML, the container asks the gadget hosting server to provide the gadget spec XML. It gets the XML from the gadget hosting server and passes it along to its gadget rendering service, which takes the XML and turns it into HTML. It then hands the HTML back to the client browser, which now can display it in a web page. For the Studio's Acme Bank and Parsley.com example, recall that Acme was the OAuth provider and Parsley was the OAuth client. In this case, Acme was also acting as the backend app and the gadget hosting server, and Parsley.com was the container and the gadget rendering server. This concludes our overview of Opensocial. Thank you for watching.